So hello, and in today's video I'm going to show you the top 10 most exciting Ark Tames, so let's just get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Carno, and when this thing was first released, obviously with the initial game, I saw our Ballistic Squid series, and obviously he got a Carno called Carny Dave, and when I got my first Carno I was so excited, and I still love using the Carno to this day. Well, mostly for nostalgia reasons, I do think the Carno does have some good advantages, and I think it is a very exciting creature overall. While people may prefer the Aloe for its bleed ability and pack abilities, the Carno can still deal bleed damage as well, and I do like the small form factor that the Carno gives too. They're also ridiculously easy to tame as well, especially on ASA with the baby Carnos, and then you can just kill the parent and then get the baby Carnos that way. But since they're TLC and they've got the extra bleed ability, I think the Carnos are still pretty useful, especially for PvE. I can see no use in PvP use for the Carno, of course, but for PvE stuff, I think the Carno is still an incredibly useful dino, and for that reason, I think it's exciting, and obviously it's just exciting for me. It's an excitable creature, it's got some great abilities, it is of a good size where I think people enjoy it, and you know, it deals good damage, and for that I think it is an exciting Ark Tame. Next up we got the Velonasaur, and my reasons for this is just because of how cool this creature looks and the abilities that are offered by this creature. It's absolutely insane, like that this is a creature that shoots spines out. It's essentially a living turret. There's no other creature like it in the Ark universe really, and just patrolling on extinction here, like there's nothing that beats it. On an ASA they're still absolutely amazing, and with all the new graphical fidelity as well, it's great. And you can just see me shooting into that theory there. Well, potentially a little bit creepy at times with some of the abilities, and you'll see that in a second. I just love the abilities of this thing, and still love the abilities that come from the Velonasaur, and that's why I think it's so exciting. I loved it at release, and I still love it now. You've obviously got the R Velonasaurs on Gen 2 as well, and they are great offerings on top of the base Velonasaur being an even stronger OP version of the original. They do great damage, they work great as turrets, and they do scale with melee as long as you're riding them. Sadly, if you're not riding them, they don't work, but I never use these things as base defense. I'm always going out with them, and they're absolutely amazing for it. Coming out next, we have got the Mantis, and what a creature this is, really, in my opinion. The Mantis is one of those where it's like, oh my god, I love the abilities that are offered by this thing. The fact that it can hold two weapons and you can use them around and just hack and slash anything, or use it for mining and utility, is such a great concept to me, and that's why I put them on this list. Again, there is no other creature like it when it comes to the Mantis, and while yes, the durability is less on these weapons than what it would be if you just shoot it yourself, you're on this fast, crazy Mantis that's swinging these things around, and you can see how much damage it's doing to that Diplo there, so it's by no means ineffective. Pikes are personally my choice of weaponry rather than swords on this thing, but I decided to demonstrate with swords because why the heck not, really. Swords just look the part, I guess, more than pikes, but usually a good ascendant pike, it will do wonders with a Mantis, and obviously you can harvest with an ascendant pick or an ascendant hatchet. They're great for my metal gathering as well, while I can just use an Anki. Sometimes I like to go up with the Mantis because I just think they're fun and cool to use. I'm not being 100% practical when I do that with a Mantis, but I still think they're great for it. So for the utility and the ability, they have to be here. At number 7, we have got the Rhyniognatha, and this is one of those where, although be it a new creature, I still think it was exciting around its release, and although I didn't particularly like it around that time, it's definitely grown on me, and although it's very nerfed in ASA, I still think it does wonders for me. So I really do like the Rhyniognatha, and it's still an exciting creature to me. While its tame method is a bit of a rip-off of the Reaper, frankly, they're still rare enough that, you know, there's an element of excitement in their taming method, I think. And obviously you have to kill a male one first, so there's some extra steps involved, and you have to sacrifice the creature on top of it. There's a lot of preparation work that you need to do, And also, it's made the swamps an even worse place to be in. And so you've got this thing chasing you in the swamps, you're absolutely done for. And it's an already hated biome, let's say. But once you've got one, they are very fast travel mounts that can pick up Rexes and all kinds of creatures like that, which is just such an exciting concept in itself. Usually you just have to cryo those things, and you just, whatever the biggest thing you pick up on a Quetzal was what you could get around with, like Stegos, and I think you can do Mammoths with a Quetzal as well, but not Rexes and Parasauritheriums like you can do on a Rhyniognatha. And while using all the taming foods, I think, is a bit rubbish for getting 100%, because I don't use these things for combat particularly. I don't do that personally. With the aid of a net gun, they're not too difficult to tame, and they're great for just flying around and transporting stuff around, and they've got such novelty to them that I think that's what gives them the excitement to put them on the list for me. Next up, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and the reason why this excited me so much at release is it's essentially just a wyvern, but easier to tame, and in my opinion, with cooler abilities. Fire wyverns are great and all with all the other options that you get on Ragnarok and Scorched Earth, but these added some new concepts which you wouldn't usually associate with dragon type creatures. You could have this tropical one, which is being shown here, and my personal favorite, the Blood Crystal Wyvern, which could suck the blood of its enemies, a bit like what the Desmodus does, although without some of the utility offered there. And, you know, they were just added so much sort of versatility to the Wyvern, let's say, and they came at a much cheaper cost, and they would passive around the place as well. I think these are a great take even on the Wyvern, and they have all the same abilities offered. While there is a level cap on when you can actually start taming these things, I still think a quick Explorer run does wonders, and you can tame it in your first session or two if you're on Crystal Isles, and they really do wonders, especially the Blood Crystal Wyvern being my favorite there. The abilities are so cool that they offer, and, you know, it's a Wyvern. What's not to love, really? Coming in at number 5, we have got the Shadowmane, and this is one of those tames where it's like, oh my gosh, like, going back to Genesis Part 2 and seeing this thing getting released again would be something which I'd probably do, because seeing this thing for the first time was so cool. It's essentially the Thyla on steroids, in my opinion, and while at launch it was more OP than it is now, and I imagine when Genesis Part 2 releases on ASA, the same will go there, and it will be nerfed perhaps even more, but it's still such a cool concept, and its mobility is insane, so I have to love it for that. Just look at how high this thing is jumping, okay? What's not exciting about that? And of course, it's got so much practical use. It has the hydration buff, and they can like scale up their damage and deal even more. They generally look cool. While the taming method is by no means exciting and is just really annoying, I still think everything else about them makes them great and so exciting as a creature concept and as a creature. Now, the Bloodstalker is one of those where I think potentially it's a bit underrated for what I would rate it at, because I personally love the Bloodstalker and use it for all of my underwater travels. I think it is a great creature for traversing underwater regions of the map, and, you know, generally I think it's got a really cool, exciting design. I personally like spiders myself, and so get along with the Bloodstalker's design very well, and I think its taming method is cool, obviously the same as the Desmodus's, or rather the Desmodus's is the same as the Bloodstalker's, and I think it works effectively for what it does, and it's exciting because you're basically like Spider-Man but in Ark, and its underwater speed versatility just makes it so great for me. And while I'm not showing the best example of it here in the B-roll, it is still a creature which, you know, when used perhaps a little bit more effectively, this B-roll was done a little while ago and on a map which doesn't really suit the Bloodstalker. If you get a map that suits it, or if you're just in the underwater regions, it's an absolute breeze to use, and its abilities are great as well, like sucking the life as some other creatures nearby. Personally, I would like to see the blood bag farming capabilities of the Desmodus on the Bloodstalker as well. That would really make sense to me. But apart from that, it is such a cool and exciting creature, and if you haven't given it a go before, please do, because it is 100% worth it. Coming in at number 3, we have got the Maewing, and what's not to love about a flying, or rather gliding, platypus that travels basically at the speed of light. This thing is an insanely quick travel mount, and considering its saddle was unlocked so early on, and its tame can simply be done with some trank arrows and a few signs, this can be had in your first hour of Ark easily, and even first half an hour, especially considering how cheap the saddle is on top of this too. I think it's unlocked like at level 18 or level 19. It's absolutely insane with a creature like this. The Maewing is the pinnacle of travel in my opinion, and while maybe not the best for a map like Aberration, and where there's a lot of incline sections, it works great in every other scenario, especially in the declines, obviously, because, you know, it's a glider rather than a flyer, and it does have uses as a feeding trough as well for you people who like to breed dinos out there, and myself included with that. But the main excitement comes from the ease of travel and the fact that it can be unlocked so early on. It can also gather berries as well, which is a great ability on top of it, but that's not the main reason for my excitement for it. In at number 2, we have got the Reaper, and this personally is a favorite of mine just because of the taming method. It was so cool at the time, and I think personally what's not to love about the xenomorph style taming method that comes from the Reaper. It's so fitting to the xenomorph that it is, obviously, and while the Reaper Queen, which I'm actually showing here rather than the Reaper King, which is the only thing you can actually tame, does lack a great ability which the Reaper Queen has in its tail ability, I still think they are both great creatures, and the excitement of taming one for the first time and the massive process on Ab was simply nothing that can be replicated with basically any other Ark creature. It was so exciting to get your first one, and you do anything not to lose it. On Ab, there was all this process of getting out of the depths as well, and that whole impregnation stage too. There's so much to it, mainly in the taming and obtaining and getting this thing process, but once you had it, you felt like an absolute god, and you felt like nothing could really face you, and it is truly like such an exciting Ark tame. And in at number 1, you probably expect it, it is the Deinonychus, the absolute pinnacle of Ark creatures for me, obviously on Valguero. Can't wait for this thing to come to ASA. This is just such a great Ark creature for me. It is packed full of abilities I love. Firstly, its taming method is great. You can get this thing up quickly just by finding a nest and getting some torches out and raising this thing up, but also it can grip on to large creatures, absolutely tear them to shreds with the bleed ability, and it's great on bosses too, because of course it works on bosses. And once you've got the pack buff as well, you are absolutely flying in the damage department. It's insane what you can do with one of these things, and truly, oh my god, they are fantastic, especially with the speed and the agility which they've got. And of course, they don't take full damage too. While their climbing is a little bit finicky, especially compared to something like the Thyla, once gotten used to, it really isn't too much of a problem at all. They are great climbers and can traverse basically any environment which you'd want them to, apart from underwater areas, but you're not really using them for that. Their speed and agility across the mainland is simply unmatched, especially with their damage dealing capabilities and their insane boss fighting skills. So nothing really gets better than the Dine for me when it comes to exciting Ark creatures, and perhaps you feel the same, but of course you can always leave your comments down below. And give it up for our patrons Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Macy, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.